Ooh, what's happening? We're having Mercury retrograde interference. So we noticed out of the 2 videos that we made already that sometimes we may experience technical problems. But because we want to make something that is very organic, that's a good word, right? Organic. We're going to leave it like that, just because we feel that the context of the videos are very positive and very good. So just be patient with the process, and hopefully and eventually we will find the means to do these videos where we don't have to see some of that static that sometimes the videos pick up. So how are you doing, MY?
I'm doing really good. Having fun.
Excellent. Ready to tango again?
Yes. Yes.
Talking about this journey of Ifa with Ifa.
More revelations.
Yes. So in this particular segment, we want to get a little bit more involved about what happened between you and the Babas. So you said in the last video, there were 2 of them. The first one was the one who brought you into the practice. And for a while, he was the one who was, giving you the information that you needed in order to get ready before your initiation. And then something happened between the 2 of you that you separated from this Babalao, or this high priest. And then you got involved with the second one, who was actually the one, if I'm understanding this correctly, that was the one who initiated you or was there through your initiation process, correct?
The second Baba?
Yes.
No.
Oh.
He was just another Babalao in another state that I had met in my Ifa journey.
So neither one were the one who were actually initiated you in the practice, right?
No, neither one were. Yeah, the one that initiated me was the person who I named Oluwo in Nigeria. And my initiation happened in 2016, I want to say. Yeah.
And this was, of course, prior to you needing to make this vow or commitment to be a protector for this other Baba, correct?
Correct. So the falling out after my initiation occurred
with the second Baba?
With the first Baba shortly, and then right after that, that's when I reconnected with the second Baba.
Okay.
And I want to say that my journey with him ended probably late 2017, early 2018. My timing could be a little bit off, but it was very short-lived.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and what year was the one that you initiated yourself finally into Ifa?
The year I was initiated
was
in 2016.
Okay, just to position ourselves in the timeline that led you into, because eventually, of course, you left Ifa. But all right, so here you have a long relationship with your first Baba, because again, he was not the only one who introduced you to the system, but he was also your Kung Fu teacher.
Yes.
So you have developed a very close relationship with him. Can you say that?
Absolutely.
Correct. Because you were young, you had started to practice Kung Fu, and that connection through martial arts led you into the spiritual path, which is interesting because in China, we have Kung Fu that is also used in the Taoist practice, where eventually not everybody, as far as I know, but some of the teachers initiate the student into Taoism, which is a spiritual practice that is used to help combine the spiritual food with the physical one.
Yes.
In your case, happened to be with Ifa, which
Kung
is,
Fu with Ifa. Yes.
yeah, it's interesting because here you're from Asia and you're getting to the African diaspora and yeah, it's very interesting. And here I'm Cuban and I get introduced into the Asian practice just because, my spiritual teacher after a Babalao was a Taoist teacher. So here's some of the affinities that you and I have in our path. Anyways, so what happened between the first Baba I knew that led you into separating yourself from him?
Oh boy. I would say for political reasons. I would say there was a difference. Remember, my relationship with him was integrated with the Kung Fu Circle, right? I mean, I helped him teach in his school, the circle of peers that I developed from that, and his family, very well. So there was a deep found connection with that, and for political reasons, at the time, of course, 2016 was the well, I don't want to get too much into politics, but basically there was then at that point in time, see, by that time I had left Los Angeles and had integrated into law enforcement, where I started analyzing, facts and stuff like that. And I tried to, at that point, I made a difference in understanding for myself in my political views. Well, they're different than that whole, the main family entity that was my Sifus. And I say we had a falling out only because I remember very clearly the month that we had this conversation, um, that basically he had asked me to come back with him, because in the particular family of initiation for Ifa, they do what's called after the 1 year of being initiated, you go back the year later to kind of seal the deal, kind of thing. Which he had called me to talk about that, but then at the same time, we'd also I'd already been having some conflicts with views regarding this in the circle of his influence, including his family members. So. And then at that time, when he called and asked for me to go back to Nigeria, I said, no, I'm not feeling it right now. And we had a long conversation about it. And pretty much the last words I remember him telling me was, just pray on it. And then we hung up, never. And at that point, he never called me again. So, and and two people could play it, where you can say, well, did I ever call him? At that point, I was kind of starting to one of the challenges I had was that I had issue, my own personal challenges was that I placed my teachers on a pedestal. This is all in hindsight, right? The whole empowering thing. And at that point, somewhere in the back of my mind, I was thinking, okay, this is where I can really kind of see to what degree of friendship I had with him. And I waited to see if he would ever call me to talk about it. He never did. So that kind of told me indirectly that that was the position that he stood. Of course, he could say the same about me, but either way, we had a falling out. So that's what happened with him.
It's interesting, as you were saying, how you put your teacher in a pedestal.
Mm-hmm.
I think some of us who are in this path of integration, where we're finding self-empowerment, one of the tendencies is to give our power away. And in the way we do that is by putting some of these people that we consider role models in a pedestal.
Right.
A very common theme, and it's a very common habit.
Right.
Happened to me as well, where these people, they hold certain knowledge, in which they show, they show us how they can, use that knowledge. And in that moment, we don't stop to think the manipulating aspect of it, because, we haven't been taught that, for every action, there is a reaction. And when you're manipulating energy, which we do all the time, because to be able to be in this reality, we have to manipulate energy. But, knowing or setting the right boundaries between, the manipulating energy to create our experiences versus manipulating other people's energy, there's got to be, boundaries, healthy boundaries.
Yes.
We need to set. But because we're in this path of learning and growing, it's the growing pains, right? We don't seem to know or be aware that there is, this idealization that takes place. We're idealizing something to a degree that is unhealthy. So we're putting these people in a pedestal, and all of a sudden we seem to forget the initial desire that we had in this journey about self-empowerment, right? Things get complicated, get confusing, and out of context. And now, we start feeling that we idealize someone, and as a response, that person felt really good. While, we were putting them in a pedestal. Boy, we made this person feel really good. And now that teacher or that person doesn't seem to know when to put a stop to it and starts feeding off that energy.
Right.
The student, it's putting, or it's showing, where, it's like, and it goes together with the commitment that we make about loyalty and devotion.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's all tied together.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in the metaphysical paradigm, remember, we are the creators of our own, right, reality. And when at the time I was manifesting that relationship energetically with him, right? So, and like you said, it didn't change. It wasn't going to change, because that's the energy, the reality of the relationship. But I mean, I would imagine it would be much different now. And part of the search, at least for me, I'm reflected to say pretty much that in my own personal journey in finding my relationship with God, remember, it's my own personal relationship with myself as well, right? So in that search, that journey of me realizing, hey, putting him on a pedestal, and then having this awakening, needed once again to be part of the realization, is that the search that I was looking for in these teachers, all in line with the theme of martial arts, is integrity, honesty, and all that stuff. And not to say he didn't have any of that, but I'm just saying for myself, that was the search, was that I had this image of martial arts instructors put them on the pedestal because they could show me what integrity and honesty and loyalty is. Well, come to find out with these later revelations, I had that within me all the time.
That's right.
And that's where the journey is so beautiful, is that once I realized that, my own empowerment comes from the realization is that I don't need to put anybody on a pedestal, because one of my lessons was that I had to see that power within myself, that strength within myself, and to see that aspect of myself without needing other teachers. That was a huge lesson. And we're talking about a lifetime of lessons here, just putting people in pedestals, for me. So big
And it's
lesson for me.
probably something that you've done in other incarnations. I mean, I think it's important to remind ourselves that this concept of time, you know, we sometimes want to know, well, how long did it take you to understand something, is irrelevant when it comes to the soul.
Right.
Because the soul doesn't care how long it takes in time about learning and understanding something. So it can be a situation or a theme that you're dealing with from incarnation after incarnation, where you finally get to that point in, you know, in a soul's time to understand from a physical perspective that you need to change. There is a, you know, a turning of events or a turning point where you finally get it, you know, like,
Yeah.
Wait a minute, what am I doing? You know, this is not something I need to do. Because a lot of times we tend to judge ourselves or feel shame within ourselves because of the choices we made. And, you know, once we get to that point where we think about what we've done, we say, oh my God, I can't believe I had to go that far to get this. And there's shame in that. I mean, it's at least, you know, I've been there, and it's like, you know, this is not about judgment. This is about what it takes. You know, how long it takes doesn't matter, but what it takes for us to get to that right understanding. So in your particular case here, you got this, right? You understood this, but it wasn't something that happened overnight. It's something that happened, you know, through a series of events that, you know, one was with this first person, and then you bounced to another person who didn't even ended up being the head priest that initiated you into Ifa.
No, it wasn't even, it was just another Baba.
Another.
Yeah.
This
And,
other person comes into the picture, and what happens then? Like, because eventually you also broke ties with this person after you were initiated, correct?
yeah, the second Baba, yeah, so the second initiation, for lack of a better term, was when I was given the title of Baba Goon. The falling out happened, I don't remember the exact, it was probably within the year after I'd gone on the Benin trip with him. There was another person involved, but irrelevant, in the sense of, at some point there was another conversation of uh, of returning to Africa again to get another title for this Baba. And the circumstances falling out with that was really just more about communication and some deception that was going on. And I didn't really need to want to get in too much into it, but ultimately there was a lot of conversation about me behind my back that I heard about later on, where he didn't want to take me back with him. And in retrospect, it was a good thing, because then that's when it made me realize that, hey, you know what? At the time, of course, I was upset. There was that basically communication was cut off with me. But at the same time, that was when the wall was really high. At that, you know, was kind of getting there. And in retrospect, it was something that needed to happen for me to realize that, you know what, this is someone that I've placed too much trust in, and things of that nature. And that's when I realized, okay, yeah, I need to cut ties with this person too, because he was saying things behind my back, and just, you know, a lot of different things. So, and I heard the things he was saying from his circle. So, but it is what it is. The results are the final, I think, is when he showed his colors to me. So, yeah.
Yeah, but you said something just now, and you used the word trust. And I feel like this whole process in the path of integration is directly connected to the word trust.
Of course.
And I believe that somehow we externalize our trust with other people, when in truth it should be an internal thing.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's like, okay, so my connection to God is also connected to this concept of trust,
Right.
trusting myself. And how much do I trust myself is dependent on how much do I trust other people. So finding that middle ground, because I feel like everything that we do, it's to eventually help us understand this concept of the middle path. When is too much of something and when is not enough?
Correct.
Is finding that, perfect balance between the extremes.
Yes.
So somewhere along that path, you're looking for self-empowerment, but there's this also connection to trust, the concept of trust, and there it comes up again in the second baba where you're like, wait a minute. And it's interesting because it took you less time than the first one. So there is an acceleration taking place here in the experience that sometimes we don't recognize when we're, in these situations. We're so immersed in the emotional aspect and of the connections that, we don't seem to move out, or distance ourselves enough to look into the situation from a neutral perspective, and is to see that, whatever time it took me the first time around, the second time is being shortened because there is enough information that now you're recognizing within yourself that is telling you this is not right.
Right. Right. And maybe that was the lesson from the first one. Who knows? Right.
That's right.
Yeah. Took, a short period of time. And of course,
So
when
the
oh,
first time with the first Baba, trust didn't come up as strong as the second one, which is also a part of the process, right? Because you have put faith in somebody who you idealize from every perspective, and to finally hit that, note where you're like, I cannot trust this person. It didn't really happen until the second Baba.
Right. Right. And and yet, well, like you said, trust was not so much of an issue with the first Baba because really, quite frankly, majority of topics that covers who we are as trustworthy beings. The first Baba I could trust, but can I
Loyalty?
trust in,
Could it
in
be loyalty, the loyalty that you had that needed to
yeah,
be broken?
yeah, that's the question that comes up, right? The friendship and the relationship, and
Loyalty.
so that's the portion that kind of fell through on the first one. But having learned that and started to realize that, you know what, that lesson was that whatever it was, that lesson at the time, the second Baba, the trust issue came up, and really the topic of it really is much simpler and fundamental, right? If
Yeah.
you are saying that you are my friend and behind my back you're saying all these things about me, then if you find that out, that's an easy no-brainer. Well, at least for me it was.
Right.
Um,
But it also, this is talking, because this is deeper than that, right? We're talking about this not just so that we can talk about things that we normally know that can happen, but it talks about also the value system that we have been taught to use over time, in which now we're needing to change that paradigm, because this is not just about breaking away from a value system. It's about also breaking through a paradigm that has been used for thousands of years.
right,
And it's about how we behave in this idea of, learning who we are. What are the value system that we have been operating from that has set us into maybe a system that we're in some ways imprisoned by our own doing.
right.
We don't even know it, because here you're using, it's like a code, or how do I say this? It's you're setting up this relationship with, these people based on a moral code, of loyalty and then trust, in a journey that it's about learning to have a better relationship with God, right? But we're using a structure that is very human-like, because God does not tell you to follow this moral code. And that's, and I'm sorry that it took me a little bit to get my point across. So it's a structure that we created ourselves, or we've been taught to use, that it doesn't work long term in the way we think it's meant to work. And one is to feel loyal to a moral code that is not installed in a way that is going to get you to the finish line in the way we're supposed to. And then, this concept of trust comes in, that you give up the trust for yourself. You have operating systems that can guide you.
Right.
To develop a relationship in a more efficient way, but you don't trust it. Because of a moral code that is supposed to be based on loyalty.
It's a man-made moral code, right? And that's the balance that you referenced at the start of this part 3, was the balance between our duality existence and our soul experience, that we're here, right? We know on a soul level that we're just here on stage of life to navigate so that we get a soul experience. But part of that challenge is, and an understanding that there are all these different frequencies in this existence, and to navigate it, right? And so at some point, because we are in this existence, at some point in operating under these rules, because we, as far as the physics behind our incarnation, right? The body, everything else. That stage is designed for us to experience these challenges for our soul experience. And so my understanding of, and how I see it is that, well, then, because we have to balance between this duality existence and these set physics behind it, at some point we have to make a decision living within this hermetic ideology of the extremes of high vibe versus low vibe. I mean, that's the thing. We can't, at least I don't know a way of operating in this duality, in this body, and accept that. And so we have to accept that basically our decisions that we make in this lifetime, there's a vibration to it, right? And if we look at God and the divine as being love, then what are the vibrations associated to it? And there's a lot of information out there that talks about love, joy, peace. Those are all high vibrational frequencies, right? When you're talking about, and then we express that in our dual existence, right? But if we make a decision to do such as lower vibe decisions, and we live in a lower vibe existence, and we let that energy consume, let it affect us more so, then we're talking about not love, not joy, not so much, but more of things such as anger, resentment. And then I personally like to equate a certain vibration to the decisions we make that will result in either love, joy, and peace, because that to me equates to operating at a higher frequency and vibration. But if I choose to make a decision to operate that results in lower vibes such as anger, hate, aggression, all those things, it's still within the scope of our existence. But for me, it's a lower vibe decision. And granted, though, regardless of those decisions, us as a soul, we are all deserving of love.
Yeah, in this particular case, I think there is a difference, because you're talking about extremes that are based on joy, or misery. But in this particular case, we're talking about power. And it's a concept that we have about power, how to use power, what we consider powerful. And the thing is that when you do not understand what your spiritual nature is, we then take information that is self-empowering as a tool to manipulate. Because if I don't know how to value my energy as a divine being, right? I mean, because we can talk about joy. Yeah, I mean, doing the right thing is to be honest with yourself and to be kind and to help other people and to do all these things. But if I am not feeling it in this moment, because like my idea is that to be able to be a good person and to be joyful is to be kind and to be like this with other people, but I'm not feeling it. And I don't know how to compensate my emotional state with that level of vibration that we call good vibration versus bad. How do I work this stuff out? Because again, we're talking here about a journey that began with the understanding and the desire to find God. And the reason why I felt the need to find God was to feel in my own power, which at that moment I didn't feel it.
Right.
But it's interesting how in that moment, as you began that journey, it started with an excitement, with curiosity, and with joy, and then eventually transforming to something else that was neither or closer to that. So this is something that we do when things, start getting complicated. We start doubting ourselves because there is an implication in that moment that it's based, in your case, was loyalty. You made a vow, which I think there is a lot of that when we start recognizing vibrations that are opposite to love. There's always this vow that needs to be taken, or this agreement where, the code of ethics or the moral ethic is given the best or all of you to that idea or to those ideals or to that system. And here's where we don't really stop to think that, wait a minute, what am I getting myself into? Because from the moment you have to agree to, without questioning, giving all of your loyalty and your faithfulness to a system, even when your intentions and your intuition is saying, no, you're giving up your power.
Right.
So, you sort of think in that moment, well, I'm doing the right thing. I'm doing this for the right reasons. You don't stop to think that it doesn't work that way.
Right.
You only owe that level of commitment to yourself, but yet I'm giving it up because I'm thinking that I'm getting something more. And in that moment, it's not joy or love, it's power.
Right. And that's all revelations is part of this journey, right? No, absolutely. And and we just wanted to, we talk in these examples of these the terms we've used, love, joy, peace, as a polarity to the lower vibe things, but we, in our existence, we dance in all the ranges of all of the different frequencies. It's part of our existence, right? So as a side note, but yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And part of real revelation now is seeing what that was, and having danced in all those different frequencies is now that you're saying, okay, I'm looking at it and saying, okay, I had to kind of go there and give up some of my power to understand that there is that lesson, is that when you trust in yourself and you trust in your personal relationship with God through yourself, then that's when the revelations of love and joy come through,
Right.
you know. And like, you know, like anybody else, we all have that journey we have to go through. So,
And it's a journey that it never ends, because sometimes, even now, with this level of awareness that I find myself in, there are moments where I always have to ask myself, okay, so who are you wanting to be loyal to what ideals? It's something that it needs to be constantly looked into, because sometimes, even to the idea of enlightenment, or to, you know, working with higher frequencies, we tend to get lost
yeah,
in the understanding of better versus not good, when everything is part of the, you know, the understanding. So, you know, because sometimes, you know, when people come and they ask me, well, you know, how do I know? And it's like, well, ask yourself, you know, put two, you know, ideas into balance and decide who is your master. You know, I always come to that. Who's my master? Is it, you know, this idea that is taking me to in a direction that is it away from me or closer to me? Because God is inside me. I mean, and of course, it took me a long time to get to that, not understanding what that meant, God being inside me. But anyways, coming back to, so basically you go through these two babas, and then there's something that happened along the way in that process, that it wasn't just about loyalty and trust, but it was also about family dynamic. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Like how your family was being affected at that moment? Or is it something you want to talk about?
sure, that's fine. And this is where part of that journey there, where I was really interacting with low vibe energies. I was doing a lot of ritual that I learned as Balagoon to um, well, among things was to protect the person that I'd given vows to, right? And I mean, this is really getting in depth into energies that really manifested like real time and had an impact. Um, I mean, I remember, I mean, and just to give background, when I went to Benin, I had on tape and um, rituals and incantations that were, I mean, an example is that could kill an animal on the spot. And I saw it myself. And some of the ritual I was doing was for the purpose of, you know, I mean, low vibe stuff, like I said. And I remember bringing in, I did one ritual one time, and thunder and lightning started coming out in a otherwise clear sky, which was, yeah, I mean, this is stuff that you only read about in the books, but it manifested for me. And on that particular day, I came in after doing the ritual, and at that time, at that time, my wife, who was very sensitive to energies, she could feel the energy, and she actually got, in terms of Ifa, mounted.
Which is it's important. Let's clarify that, because maybe it's a term used that is different, but here it's about having mediumship abilities. A person
Yes.
who is able to channel different types of energy. So in your terms, it's used as mounted. In ours, it's just somebody who has that capacity.
Right, right. And yeah, she's definitely gifted in that way. But what's part of the initiation process and or the ritual process for me when I went to Benin was that there was protection medicine that was given to me in doing this roles as Balagoon. And I was protected when I was doing these rituals. Doesn't mean that my family members were. And ultimately that's what happened. And we found out this later, after that it had been an issue. Because she got mounted, and I mean, her demeanor changed angry, and just aggressive and aggression, and she had no control over it. I mean, after these episodes, and it wasn't just once, it was several episodes. I mean, I have these on video because I was trying to, number one, document what was going on so that I could fix it. And then and then at some point, I realized that the person that I was protecting didn't have the tools for me to remove what was going on. I mean, one of the episodes that happened.
So the person didn't have the medicine to heal whatever issues were coming about, this rituals.
Yeah, yeah. And and we alluded to this in the last part where yeah, if I had access and resources to the person in Benin and or Nigeria, hey, how do I stop? Then that might be a different story. But this other person, the second Baba, absolutely did not. And of course, I went to him and said, hey, let's do this. Can we fix this? And you can just tell that he was just pulling straws left and right, trying to figure out what was going on. He had no idea.
He had no idea.
Had no idea. And
here, I want to clarify it, and I want to put a little bit of it's a pause in your story, MY, that there are a lot of practitioners of Ifa who seem to claim that they have the knowledge and the wisdom of Ifa when they don't. And it's very hard to know, especially if we're seeking help or if we're in need of help, to differentiate
right.
Who is capable and who is not.
Yes.
So a lot of times, because somebody can come and play a few shamanic tricks, which, is a trick, it's a sorcerer capacity to, it's kind of like when you began in this journey that you learned a few tricks, which I've seen over time, even with shamans, that beginning in the shamanic path, just because they know a couple of songs, they feel like they're qualified to handle the load, and they're not. Right. And there's a big difference when you grow up in a culture that since you're a little child, you already come with that inclination because it's passed down from your ancestral lineage, one generation to the next, of when you initiate yourself in a practice because you either have an issue with your health or you have problems, economic problems, that you think that by initiating yourself into that path is going to resolve and soothe that problem. Very different the intentions that we have when we decide to go into a path like that. Or like, in your situation, MY, that it was about self-empowerment.
Right.
So, one of the things that I see is that, even though in your particular situation and mine, we have connected with this type of people, that not everybody out there that is in this path is bad and is, and is doing the wrong thing. Unfortunately, there are many agents that they put themselves in a situation where they know what they're doing when they're not. And the reason why we're making these videos is to help people understand, or maybe, open their minds to know when it is that you're in contact with the right person and when it's not.
Right.
All right.
And,
so
yeah.
Let's get back to this.
Yeah. So, and that's where you have to sort of get within yourself and discern, if comments are made to you that imply that you have to give some of your power to somebody else, that's where I would say be careful. When someone says that, hey, I'm your God, I'm your, so and so, and you have to have faith with me.
Yep,
That's a human being speaking to you. And if you're looking for God, then it's not through that human being, right? And as the theme here is that it's through yourself. They might be a guide at some point if you find the right teachers, but when their ego starts to change the way they practice their spiritual system, and it makes them, they put themselves on a pedestal, that's where I would say be careful. And that's been my lesson.
And I think that here's where vibration comes in, because you've been talking about energy and the difference between a low vibe frequency to a high. When we are not in a good space because we're struggling in finding answers to our challenges, and we go out and search for help, especially coming from this type of people that are, shamans or high priests or priestesses, depending on how we feel about ourselves is the type of person that we're going to attract.
Yeah.
So if our self-esteem is not the best in that moment, because we have this idea that we don't have what it takes to find the medicine or the cure to our problem, we are desperate in finding the cure, and in the way that we're doing it is by attracting people that may be in a position to take advantage of your insecurities, because that's the lesson you need to learn.
Right. And I can attest, that's what happened with me, right? After the first Baba, to the second one, desperate to find another teacher, another person that I could put on a pedestal. Yeah. And that's why maybe the lessons was so short-lived, is that, wait a minute, what's going on here? This is, it's a repeat.
It's not just about finding the cure. This is what we need to realize. It's not just about finding the cure. It's about also the process that you go through in order to find the cure, that ultimately is about self-empowerment. Okay. So, you find self-empowerment by valuing yourself and your divinity, let's call it that way for a moment, or you find it by getting somebody who does not value, like your energy, because they don't know how to do it either, by taking advantage of you. So I think we have to come to terms that every experience that we have is all inclusive.
Yeah.
You can be very naive, very innocent in that process of learning self-empowerment, but ultimately the universe takes and brings the lesson all included. And it's a very painful way of learning it, but it's what it takes for you to get it. Right. So you got to be careful about where you go asking for help. I've had situations where women come and they're desperate to resolve a problem, and they listen to what I have to say, but after they're done, it's not enough, and they have to go and find somebody else. But what they don't see about themselves in that moment is that whatever I share with them was not enough to soothe the void they feel within themselves about not honoring, respecting, and really loving themselves enough. So they have to go somewhere else to get some sort of advice that is going to take them away from the self-empowerment, because my idea of gaining that capacity is too simple. So it's got to be more complicated than that. It can't be that easy.
Well, the path of self-realization and empowerment is a hard journey, because that's when the human condition puts its challenges, and our inner child, or our upbringing, behavior patterns.
All of
that's when it comes all against us.
Right.
And and that's by human nature. It's hard for people to do.
Right.
So number one, to realize, and we're talking about the law of assumption that Neville Goddard talked about, but yeah, I mean, that's part of that process. I mean, it all encompasses anybody's journey, right? So,
right.
But anyway.
Well, and it also, and to close this segment, I think it's important also, because this is something that I always say, we're not just healing ourselves in this time around as we are going through this shift in consciousness. We're also healing a lot of the unresolved issues that we in a soul level bring from, the journey, the journey of the soul, which it incorporates our lineage as well as, the planet trajectory in the history of, its own evolution. So this is not just about one thing. It's about many different things happening at many different levels.
Absolutely.
That, is going to create the level of harmony and balance that is needed in order for us to, continue this jump. So let's leave it there, and we'll see ourselves again in the next segment.
Part 4 coming.
All right. Bye.